Hey, hi everybody. Hopefully everyone is doing a-okay today. Today we are live on twitch.tv/GG Rogers. We are going to be taking a look at some archetypes and decks not a whole lot of people are playing right now on ladder. Slowly but surely I'll be trying to make a bit more content and focusing on archetypes that you could pick up and play. That if you don't want to really play any of the main deck archetypes, you don't want to play Overlord, well, don't have to. You can play any other cool and interesting archetype that exists on the ladder. Maybe not in Dragon Empire, because there's kind of only like 3 or 4 right now. But right now we're going to take a look at Stoi. Stoi is not really played that much, and if you are playing it, it's usually Flagberg. Not a lot of people have a whole lot of faith in Zorga, and I'm here to tell you Zorga is a really cool and interesting archetype that you might want to pick up and play. Especially with the fact that in their days we have access to the clan selection, the festival collection. We have access to Clouded Miasma. So you would think, well, if you have access to Clouded Miasma, why not play Red Zorga? I'm not saying Red Zorga is better. I think that you have a good argument to play either of them if you want to. Both are fine and both have different facets that they tackle. Red Zorga is very dependent on rear guards that you currently have on the board. Blue Zorga is a little less so, but the board space and your soul and your counterblast can get a little choked. Where Red Zorga doesn't really have that much issue with it. Needs a little bit less setup since you have access to your triple drive. And with Blue Zorga, your columns are a little bit larger than Red. Not by much. 10 to 15k power can sometimes make a bit of a difference if your opponent has to PG every single turn. So without further ado, let's get into the list. So first things first, you want to be running 4 copies of the main Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. Its skill is when you play a normal order, you can bind a normal order with a different name from your drop zone in Alchemagic. This works really cool because recently today there was a card revealed from Bushiroad. They revealed the order today, so in the TCG, when we do get this card, it allows you to have a Persona Ride without having to Persona Ride, which is funny. Which is super funny. It gives extra front power to your front row, so that's really sick. And then you can also use the Counterblast one to call a card from your drop zone. It's very cheap. Well done. Yeah, it's relatively cheap. It gets you a card on the board that allows you to target it with skill, sacrifice it, give it power, all that good stuff. And then, since that's your mainstay card, then we're running 2 copies of Grief, Despair, Rejection. This version of Zorga can only play Grief, Despair, Rejection. Red Zorga cannot play this card, but you do have a bonus with the fact that with Clouded Miasma, it does give you front row plus 5k, but a combination with Grief, Despair, Rejection, it's plus 15, which allows you to play as though you're playing on a Persona Ride turn, which is very scary for a lot of archetypes to deal with. Then of course, 4 copies of Roaming Prison Dragger. It's your main beat stick of the deck. If it's in your drop zone, when you play normal order, you can superior call it. So in the early game, if you're feeling a little frisky and you have the soul and you have the orders in hand, you can actually even play like a condensation out of your hand, so blasting 1. It calls itself out, and it gets plus 10, or you can give it a critical, depending on what type of order variations that you can play. I like running it at 4. I think it's a staple. Pick it up and play it at 4. Then, of course, Clouded Miasma. We talked a little bit about it at length. You can choose a grade 3 or less in your drop zone and superior call it. It's a pretty good card. Try to set up a board that you're always and consistently hitting for 25 or more K power every single turn, or at least forcing your opponent to card with 2 cards out of their hand if they can. Then, of course, your ride deck, Husk, it's mandatory, you need to run it to get your orders back. This variant, we are playing Tearful Malice, which allows you to retire it too. Then we also have Shadow Cloak, your main staple unit that sends your orders to the drop zone. The targets for this card, okay, so this is one of the coolest things you'll need to pay attention to it. Depends on what your order is. You want to send the order that mirrors it. So if you have, say for example, a Grief, Despair, Rejection in your hand, you want to try to send a Clouded Miasma to your drop zone. If you have a Clouded Miasma, you send Grief, Despair. Or if you open Condensation, you want to send Tearful Malice, for example. So you want to send things that tends to mirror the utility cards that you want to try to use them for. So that's something you need to pay attention to. One of the first orders I will recommend sending to the drop zone, though, is this card. It's called Overcoming Unnatural Death. which allows you to choose your orders from your drop zone and add them back to your hand. But I only recommend doing this if you have enough orders in your drop zone to set up for it, or else it'll be a dead order that you're sending in drop zone and you're not drawing your other orders, which can be very awkward. Then 3 perfect guards, we're running 4 in total. 2 other orders we're running the Spiritual Body Condensation, Soul Blast 1, Superior Call 1, very straightforward, nothing really too drastic. And of course we're running the Chain Ranker to round off the ride line. And then the other great ones we're running is the Rogue Headhunter, which allows you to reduce the cost of Iconoblast of your Alchemagic for this turn, and it stacks. So if you have multiple copies of Headhunter that you place this turn, you get multiple chances of being able to reduce the Iconoblast of any future Alchemagic that you're using. And since my build tends to use a little bit of Iconoblast, Headhunter is a little bit more important than Shadowcloak, but Shadowcloak is just as good. So your opening mulligan, you'll try to be aiming for Roaming Prison Dragons, at least 2 orders. You want to at least try to have 2 orders per turn if you can. If you can't, at least 1 order and at least 1 copy of Overcoming in your drop zone that you can get it back into your hand. And then my own spicy tech that I like running is Sleeve Tugging Bell. Is for the long grindy games, especially against the matchup that's called Gravidia, which uses the Meteorites to retire your rear guards, and sometimes you might bleed yourself dry of using all of your Alchemagic orders to try to keep up with a lot of their pace, and Bell allows you to reset your drop zone, possibly get a copy of your Overcoming Unnatural Death, and if you get that into your drop zone, you can start recycling all your orders all over again. And your opponent's like, please die, and you're like, nah, I don't wanna. And then you have 7 criticals. We're running 7 criticals, 4 draw, and 2 effect heals. Since we do have Shadowcloak to be able to bounce them back to our hands, these are varied silver bullets depending on the matchups. This has been really clean against Gravidia. This has been pretty okay against Bruce and Bastion and Thiegra and Overlord, just a whole bunch of resetting archetypes that tends to proc this more than once. It's okay. You can also choose to run vanillas if you want to. That's entirely up to you. Then for last things last, Elementaria Sanctitude. It's more or less a free pagey into decks like Kyrie, Bruce, Bastion, Mahar. All those archetypes allows you to be able to use this for free. And who doesn't like free cards? Who doesn't like the meme activating and tanking free cards in their hand? Which is really nice. Okay, so since I won't be able to maybe find an opponent who will allow me to do this play, and having to sit through the combo to try to explain it to you, might as well just pick up my physical cards to explain it to you. So here we have the Clouded Miasma and Grief, Despair, Rejection, and I will like put up like some fake cards, I guess. I'll just put this here, and what about another one, another Headhunter here. All right, and then we're gonna be doing an Alchemagic. So one of these is in our drop zone. We'll probably do this. This is in our drop zone. Doesn't really matter what's in our drop zone. Okay, so now we have a form of shield in our drop zone now. So how Shadowcloak works is whenever you do an Alchemagic, you can Soul Blast 1, take it plus 5k, and you can, if you Alchemagic, you can bounce a card from your drop zone back to your hand. And then if we also have cards like Roaming Prison Dragon, for example, and those are in our drop zone. And this is not necessarily Magical Christmas Land. You can get this relatively easy almost every single time, especially if you're cycling through a lot of your resources, you're hitting your draw triggers, you're doing your thing, and you're playing your deck out efficiently, and you're not getting punished for like overextending or anything. So it'll go like so. So the Shadowcloak is usually behind the Vanguard, because the Vanguard, how much boost or power it is, doesn't necessarily matter. So then you use Clouded Miasma, because you probably played these before or whatever, and then you pair it up with the Alchemagic of this. Right? You pay their costs that need be. You pay this cost by Counterblasting 1, and then you pay this cost by Counterblasting 1 again. And then you can resolve this one, which calls a card out, then resolve this to give plus 10k to 3 units, so to be this one and this. Then these 3 cards will trigger. All 3 of these will trigger. And then you could choose the order as they resolve. So I will choose to resolve the Shadow Cloak first. That brings back a card from my board to my hand by Soul Blasting 1. So I'll Soul Blast the Husk, and I'll return this Perfect Guard into my hand, which allows you to then Perfect Guard again. So it is very annoying for a lot of decks to deal with a card. That card that can always get you back Perfect Guards whenever you want them to. Especially if you've been able to use them every single turn. Which is very, very gross. It's very gross. And then also on your offensive turn now, so you have a Perfect Guard. This is in your drop zone. This is bound. You have a Perfect Guard in your hand. You have a Twin Drive. You have 2 columns that are hitting for close to, I think, 43 or 48k power. And then you also have this in hand plus your drive check. So this technically works as though it's the order that allows you to get extra drive checks. But now you have a selective way of being able to like manipulate your drop zone and getting back utility pieces that you can use every single turn. So drawing into cards like over trigger, crit triggers, heal triggers, all that stuff is actually not a detriment to this deck. It's actually really good because you can always recycle them. Which is awesome. I really like Zorga because of this. And there you have it. Ladies and fellowsmen, that is my introduction into Zorga, the breakdown for it. Hopefully I taught some of you something. If you guys find me cool, any interesting combos for yourself, I'm not going to spoil everything for you. I want you guys to figure it out for yourselves as well. Some really cool and interesting lines that you can do with this deck that allows you to manipulate and shape the game as you see fit. And especially with the addition of Cloud in Miasma, this allows you to play the game as slowly or as fast as you want to. This deck is a very resilient grind deck. But it does need a little bit of setup to be able to do so, whereas Red Zorga is a little less of that. With that being said, this is it for the YouTube. Be awesome, stay awesome, guys. Have a wonderful day. Thank y'all for tuning in and stopping out by. And until next time, be safe.
In other words, I love you. In other words,